meeting you right where you are on your foster care journey. This is the Forgotten Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Forgotten Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Cabe, and I am so happy to be with you. If you are part of the foster care community, passionate about serving, or simply interested in learning more, we are here for you. In every episode of this podcast, you will hear stories from men and women who have experienced foster care to one degree or another. They may have grown up in the system, are caseworkers, foster parents, or others who are here to bring you hope or encouragement. If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe and share it with a friend. And remember, you are not alone. I hope you enjoy the Forgotten Podcast. All right. Well, no, I'm so excited to talk with you and hear your story and your perspective, because it's just not often that we get to hear from someone who works in the field of foster care and social work. And Delaney, I would just love to know, like, why'd you start this work? Why'd you get into this work of social work, and specifically foster care social work?
Sure. I think from a young age, I just had a heart for people and children and families going through hard things. And growing up, I got introduced to foster care and adoption through my church and friends and family around me who were fostering or adopting. And I also got to volunteer with different things in my community and get to meet all sorts of different people around my town. And I also took like global missions to Haiti and met people overseas, and just really had a heart for social work in general. And my family growing up, my parents decided at one point to get into foster care. And so we became a foster family, and we had a placement of 3 kids and ended up adopting one of them. They were all bio siblings, but they all had different dads. So 2 of them were able to return home to bio family, and one we adopted. So I really got to see that side of foster care and what it's like to be a foster family. And so when I was in college and was trying to decide what to get my major in, I decided on social work. And I really like I like the idea of foster care and getting children back with their birth parents. I wish that we didn't need foster care, but I think it is sometimes needed. And so when this opportunity came for me to get into casework, specifically in foster care, I felt like God was leading me to that. And so I've been in it for a little over a year.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. It sounds like you've had a lot of different exposures that just continue to just point your heart towards this.
Definitely.
How old were you? Do you remember how old you were when your parents brought in kids through foster care?
Yeah, I was 15. So I was a little bit older.
Wow. That's a big transition at 15.
Yes, definitely. I had wanted to foster though for so long, or adopt or something. I always wanted to be a part of a big family. So I think I was the first one in our family that was like, come on, let's do something. And so I was super excited about it. And it turned out it ended up being one of the hardest things that I've ever done. And I tell people that what I thought it was going to be and what it actually was, I think about 5% of it was what I thought it was going to be, and the other 95 was not what I thought it was going to be. But we saw God in so many ways through that, and He was our strength, and it was one of the things that also has grown me the most in my life.
Wow. Man, do you feel like there were times, and I know we're going to get into the agency worker perspective for sure, but I really want to explore this a little bit. Do you think there were times when your parents were like, did we do something wrong? Should we have not done this? Are we hurting the rest of our family?
Absolutely. The oldest of the 3, he was 4 when we got him, and the others were, the first one was 6 months, and then 6 months later we got a newborn. And so the 4-year-old had experienced a lot of trauma, and that came out in a lot of different behaviors, and it just continued to worsen as he got older. And that was very difficult to have in our home. And I know that there were many days my parents wondered if they did the right thing. And me and my siblings would just say, like, absolutely, you did the right thing. Like, God called us to this.
Wow.
He gave us the strength to do it. And we were stronger as a family because of it. So I've never regretted the fact that we fostered and that I grew up in that environment for many years.
Wow, that's super encouraging. I am sure it was so encouraging for them to hear their children saying, "Yes, you did the right thing. Keep going." That's huge.
Yeah.
Wow. So I'm curious if that has held true in your work moving into casework. What do you feel like that 5% of what you expected versus reality has been consistent like it was before? Or do you feel like you were in a little more equipped?
I felt like I did know a little bit more what I was getting into. I think just, with my experience with foster care, I saw our caseworkers that we worked with coming into our
Sure.
home, and I had heard a lot about casework. So I knew it was going to be very hard. I knew it was going to take a lot of time and be very overwhelming. And I think it's been super hard to live it out, but I think I did know what I was getting into a little bit.
Sure. And so, how would you describe to someone, here's what I do, here's my job?
Let's see. Yeah, it's hard to describe all of what it
Yeah.
is, but it's a mix of office work where we have a lot of paperwork, writing court reports, service plans for parents. We keep paper files of everything, so filing. And we also have to document everything that we do, all the client interaction we have. So a good portion is office work. And then we do a lot of client visits. We sometimes have to supervise parent-child visits if we don't have enough case aides to help with that. And then there's a certain amount of times each month that we have to see each of our clients, parents, foster parents, and the children. So we are going all over doing those visits. And then we attend like court hearings and administrative case reviews where DCFS reviews the cases and the work that we're doing. So that's kind of a good sum of everything.
And how many kids do you have on your caseload right now?
So I just had some cases close, but as of like 2 weeks ago, I was at 20 kids, and we try to keep the max
Okay.
at 15.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And that's pretty common, isn't it, to have more than the ideal?
Yes, it is common.
Now, tell me too, is that 20 kids or 20 cases?
That is 20 kids. So I'm not
Okay.
sure how many cases that amounts to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. Wow. So we talked about, you shared that pretty really well, but obviously there's a lot more to it, right? Than just like, here are the duties that I do. There's so
Yeah.
much emotional that weighs on you. Can you talk to us about that? Like, help us see inside, like what it's like in here in your heart and in your mind to be a worker.
Sure. It really is an emotional roller coaster. I feel like some days I'm like, I'm good. And this is a good day. Not much has happened. And then there are other days where you're just completely burnout and completely emotionally drained. And some nights I work till 9 p.m. and then you have to get up the next day and show back up to work. And yeah, there's definitely a lot of emotions that come with it. I think it's been difficult to work with the birth parents. I love working with the birth parents because my goal is to get the kids safely back with the birth parents. But the birth parents are going through a lot. and they get frustrated with the whole system and with the rules that they have to follow, understandably. But I'm the first person of contact that they have with the agency. And so I get a lot of hateful words sometimes, and I feel misunderstood at times. And that is hard for me to take because it's like, oh, my heart is not just for the children, but also for the birth parents. And when they think that I'm against them or that I'm working against them, I'm like, oh man, if you could just see that that is not true. And so I try and show up each day. A lot of times I pray like for God to give me his heart and his perspective for these people and to love them unconditionally. It's easy to want to defend myself, but I'm learning to let that go and just love everyone unconditionally, no matter what their behaviors are. Um, and then just there's always trauma and hard stories that I'm hearing every single day. And I have direct contact with that, and that is really hard to handle at times. And then to go back into my own personal life and try and not that I don't want to, I don't know, try and kind of compartmentalize a little bit, and that can be the emotional toll that that takes is really hard. And also the workload is very overwhelming, and there's just not enough time to do it all and to do it all as to the standard that I would like to do it to. So I'm a perfectionist, so I have had to learn to let go of some of that perfectionism. And it's really hard though when I have to choose what's going to get done. And I feel like there's 20 plus things that really need to get done in the moment, and I have to choose one. So those are kind of a lot of emotions that I feel on a consistent basis.
Yeah, and you talked about praying before. How do you release that? Like, what does that look like for you to not be buried alive by all of that?
Yeah, like moment by moment, I try to rely on God and his grace and his strength, because I realize that in and of myself, I cannot do it, and I cannot
Hmm.
meet all the needs. I cannot do this job and do it well without his sustenance. And so it's really a moment by moment relying on God to be enough, and for me to let go of my own wants and desires and ask him to do what he wants to do in me, and for me
Hmm.
to get done what he wants me to get done.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I'm guessing you would say that you're having siblings that were in foster care and the experiences you've experienced that built some muscle for you that you're probably using now. Would you say?
Definitely, yes. I was trying to think the other day, because I for the longest time I felt like our foster care journey was the hardest thing I had ever done. And then I was
Mm.
thinking, with this job and being caseworker in foster care, do I feel like this is harder, or doing foster care with my family was harder? And I'm not sure. One of the two is but the hardest thing that I've ever
Oh
done,
boy.
but it takes a lot of relying on God.
Yeah, which is like exactly what we're called to do
Exactly.
every single day.
Yes.
Yeah. Uh, you have shared recently that it's really hard to know how to respond to people when they're like, "How was your day?" And
Hmm.
it's hard to say, it doesn't feel appropriate or right to say, "Oh, it was good."
Right.
Right? Can you expand more on that idea or what you were talking about there?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people will ask me what my job is like or how is my job. And I think the standard response for people is usually to say, it's good. And,
Mhm.
or it's hard, or I don't know. And I just felt like I couldn't sufficiently express to other people when they ask how my job is going, because it's it's really hard, and there's a lot of hard things that I come in contact with. And so I can't really describe my job as good, but I try and see the good amidst all the messy and all the broken. And I see God working and doing things. And even though it is hard, and even though it does take a lot of sacrifice, it's worth it to me. And these people are worth it to me. I've seen God in this job. I've seen God meet me where I'm at and be enough. I've seen Him do amazing things that even though I wouldn't necessarily describe my job as good, I am very grateful for it, and I'm grateful for everything that it is and the people that I get to work with on a daily basis. But yeah, it can be hard to express that because I think as people, a lot of times we want what's easy and we want what's comfortable, we
Yeah.
want what's good. And my job most days are not those things. So I can't really say it's good, but yet this is where I want to be right now.
Yeah. Yeah, you probably very rarely, if ever, end a day and go, well, I got it all done.
Yes.
And I feel great about the day.
Exactly. Yes.
And that's
It is
hard. That's
hard.
hard because we want to wrap things up in a bow and feel like we can shut it off and go home. And when you're dealing with people and relationships and trauma, that's very difficult to shut off,
Yes,
isn't it?
it is.
How has that, do you feel like it has impacted your friendships, your personal relationships when you've experienced something really significant at work, something really hard? And I mean, have you seen that impact those other things?
I feel like it can sometimes. I feel like a lot of my friends and family are understanding, but I also don't always want to weigh down my friends and family with what I experience
Mm-hmm.
on a daily basis. So I find it sometimes hard to enjoy things in my personal life that's not my work life
Mm-hmm.
because the things that I do in my personal life seem insignificant compared to what other people are going through. And
Mm-hmm.
I have noticed that when I get together with friends and family, I'm still thinking about people at work, and it's hard to truly explain what, I don't know, other people's stories and what
Mm-hmm.
went on at work that day. So, and I
Sure.
feel like work takes over my personal life in some ways during the week that sometimes I'm just too
Mm-hmm.
tired to do any social activities during the week.
Yeah. Sure. So there's a real sacrifice in what you're doing, not only during the 9 to 5, quote,
Hmm.
quote, hours, but it impacts you, doesn't it? It affects you. It's hard. It takes a toll.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. What do you feel like you're learning through your experience in this work?
So much. As with all hard things, this is growing me and stretching me. It's been really good. Um, what am I learning? Think, I mean, obviously just being drawing closer to God through all of this and relying on Him and has been huge. Um, I often mess up and I realize that I can't do it all. So I'm learning that humility goes a really long way. And
That's good.
I can't, sometimes I can't keep everything straight. So just going to people directly and being like, I'm sorry. Yes, I did say I was going to do that. Or yes, I did mess up. Usually people are more receptive of that than me just kind of blowing it off and trying to make it look like I
Mm-hmm.
didn't mess up. Um, I'm learning it's I've realized like most parents really want to be reunited with their children, and no matter what they're facing in their life, no matter what things have happened, they still want to be reunited. And sometimes trauma and the things that these parents have experienced themselves makes it really hard for them to do that. So just learning to have empathy and put myself in their shoes and make sure that they are seen and heard and known, despite the situations that they find themselves in, has been something that I'm learning to do. And yeah, just it's continuing to die to my flesh and the things that
Hmm.
I want and the things that I am most comfortable with, just learning to do that and seek after the things that God wants to do in me. And that's been a real learning process through this all as well.
Yeah. Wow. That's beautiful. And like you said, what you're doing, Delaney, is you are living out the gospel every single day. And that will be rewarded, and maybe not here, right?
Hmm.
But in heaven. And I think you're already experiencing some of those beautiful rewards of just relationship with God and experiencing Him more. But that doesn't mean it doesn't take away the hard and the choices that you're
Right.
making to sacrifice and for the benefit of others. And it's really beautiful. And for someone just really in your young adulthood, learning these lessons now, man, it's powerful. And you're going to just continue to build upon that and grow and continue to be a mighty woman of God. And that's exciting to see what all God has in store for you and through you now and in the future. I know this is kind of a question there is no typical, but I'm still going to ask it. What does a typical day in your work life look like?
Sure. I would say most days I usually try and schedule in some office time and then some client visits. So the
Okay.
first part of my day, I usually start out at the office and I work on documenting things that have happened in the past few days. I try and stay up on all of that documentation.
Mm-hmm.
And I work on random paperwork if I have court reports or service plans to write. I work on that. And there's a lot of referrals for every
Mm.
client who needs services or there's a lot of people that I work with, given for each child, there's two birth parents, there's two foster parents typically.
Right.
And so there's a lot of
Sometimes
referrals to
CASA,
do.
right?
And
Court
then,
advocates.
yes, yep, I work with CASA. I love the
Mm-hmm.
cases that have CASA on them. And then there's different meetings that I might have in the first part of my day. Then the second half, I usually will go out and see clients, whether that's visiting
Mm.
parents in their home or children in whatever their home they are in at the moment, or supervising parent child visits. And some of those
Mm.
visits and clients are 2.5 hours away at times. So there's a lot of
Wow.
driving too.
Lots of driving.
Yes.
Wow. Do you find that the driving, I could see it both. I could see it being very draining, but also in some ways maybe sort of refreshing because it's at least, but it's probably, no, it's not all time alone. You're actually transporting kids. Yeah? Or
Sometimes,
what?
yes.
Tell me about the
Yep.
drive.
Yes. Usually, if I have to go really far, I'm by myself, because that just means
Okay.
I have, like, a client that lives quite a ways away. For the
Okay.
parent-child visits,
Okay.
I might have kids that I'm transporting as well, but we try and not have them in the car for too long. So, I enjoy
Mm-hmm.
my time with the kids in the car when we just get to talk, and they like to listen to different
Mm-hmm.
music, and so I enjoy that time. And then, yes, driving when I'm by myself, I do try and use that time to pray, listen to podcasts or music, and just kind of
Mm-hmm.
decompress. Sometimes
Yeah.
the driving gets to be a lot, but I try and use it as a time to just kind of refresh.
Mm-hmm. It's so much about perspective, isn't it?
It
It seems like
is.
you probably have to spend a lot of time fighting for the right perspective.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, yeah, because there's a lot of different perspectives you could have in this job. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it can be easy to get caught up in all the work and in all of the hard things that it's easy to lose sight of why I'm in this and the perspective that I want to have. And that really does change everything. Because if you have the wrong perspective, it's easier to respond to clients in a way that I don't want to respond.
Sure.
And if I try and have the right mindset and the right perspective, I feel like that helps me to respond to clients and engage with them well.
Yeah, totally. That makes a ton of sense. Would you say that there are some common misconceptions that you hear from people who either want to become foster parents or who want to serve the foster care community? Would you have any that you can think of?
Sure. I think some people get into foster care to adopt. And I typically tell people who are interested in fostering, don't get in it if you want to adopt, because that's not the goal. That might have to end up happening in the end, but foster care really is just hopefully temporary to help birth parents get back on their feet, get to a place where they can safely care for their kids, and then have those kids return home to them. So when I think it's really beautiful when people get into foster care with the goal of seeing families reunified and being a part of the team and cheering on the birth parents to get their kids back. I think a lot of other people have misconceptions that foster families are not necessarily good and are not a safe place for kids, and that there's a lot of corruption that goes on in that. My experience so far has been great with foster families. A lot of foster families are biological family, which has been really cool. So the kids can go with someone that they already know and are comfortable with. And I tell people, if there are huge safety concerns with foster families at any moment, I can pull the kids. I'm not going to leave kids in a home that is not safe. So it seems like a lot of
Right.
people think that way. Trying to think other misconceptions. I know some people think that I know all, like within my town, I know everything about what's going on with children and families. And the reality is, I only work with like 15 to 20 kids at a time. So I get to know my families well, the families that I work with, but
Yeah.
I don't know it all.
Yeah. That is great to hear. I think that I appreciate you sharing all of those, and I can imagine media and the unfortunate and tragic stories that are negative. That's what so many people hear and think about foster care, either against birth families or against foster families. Really, it can be either or, because there are cases on both sides where people have not been healthy, safe. There have been tragedies,
Yeah.
right? But I think the majority are people who really are trying to help.
Yes.
And the majority of birth families are really trying to get their kids back.
Yeah, definitely.
And if we can be a part in reunifying, that is biblical. That is gospel.
Yes.
Again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the most
Del-
rewarding things to see
Yeah.
kids return to their parents safely and be confident that these parents can do it and that these kids are going to be safe. So,
Yeah, that's incredible. It's incredible. Do you have any ways, Delaney, that you're caring for yourself?
yeah, I feel like, well, I try and take time for myself. During the week, it kind of can be harder to just not forget about work, but take a mental break from work. I feel like during the week, I kind of think about
Sure.
it a lot. But after each evening, after I'm done with work, whatever time that may be, I try and have at least an hour to myself to read, to take a walk, to cook some food, or just simple things like that. And then on the weekends, I don't work on the weekends unless I'm on call. Every once in a while, we have to take an on-call phone where we're on call after hours for a whole week. So sometimes I have to work on the
Okay.
weekends for that. But otherwise, I do not work on the weekends, and I just use that time to really rest a lot and reconnect with family and friends that I may not have been able to see during the week. And I turn my work phone off on the weekends, and I feel like I'm able to kind of
Nice.
unplug in that way. And then
Mm-hmm.
also talking with
That's awesome.
others as well has really helped. I have to be careful with client confidentiality, not to share too much with
Mm-hmm.
family and friends, but just having someone that I can kind of open up and share what I'm struggling with, or
Mm-hmm.
what's been going on, has been huge to just verbalize that.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I wonder if, I mean, it sounds like you're super intentional, and I love that. Do you feel like that's been something that you have always had in you, is kind of this desire to be intentional? Or do you feel like that's come because you need it, you need it so bad? Or is it a little of both, maybe?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I feel like I've always grown up pretty intentional. I mentioned earlier, I am a perfectionist, so everything that I do has a reason behind why I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I can wear myself out doing that, but
Yeah.
I feel like I have always been somewhat intentional. Um, and then going into this job, I just heard a lot. You hear a lot of caseworkers saying that they get burnt out, that they don't stay in the job very long.
Mm-hmm.
That when
Mm-hmm.
your job is helping other people in hard places, that you need to make sure to take self-care. So I think just going into this job, I knew that that needed to be a priority of mine so that I didn't get burnt out. And it's
Mm-hmm.
almost, I can feel it if I have not been taking enough time for myself, if I have let my job kind of overtake my life, I can feel the burnout. And then when I
Mm-hmm.
do take time for myself and take time to do self care, I can feel a complete difference. And it helps me to be able to show up for people that I'm working with in a much better way than when I am weary and tired and
Mm-hmm.
not recharged.
Yes. And this, what you're saying right here, is such an important message for every one of us, regardless of our job,
Yes.
and specifically for foster parents, for people living intentionally. We want to be excellent at what we do. We want to live for God's kingdom, right? We want to push forward. But if we don't pause and refill and refresh, we will get stuck, and we will fall.
Yes.
And I love to hear what you're saying, is that we just, self-care, I've heard this said, but self-care is not selfish, right?
Right.
And it's so important that we recognize that we are caring for ourselves, and it's in order to be refreshed, and then we have more to give. It's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm. Well, what keeps you going, Delaney? What keeps you going forward, keeps you in this work?
Knowing that I'm right where I feel like I'm supposed to be, knowing that I'm in what I feel like God's called me to for this time and season, is what keeps me going. Also, the kids and the families that I get to see reunified, the people that I work with, they're the reason I do what I do. And so, even on the hard days and through the hard things, I just think about what I've already seen happen that has been positive, and think about these kids. And it's really neat the role that I get to play in these kids' lives, because they know that they can say anything to me, that if they ever feel unsafe or have concerns, they can talk with me about those things. And so being somewhat of a safe place for these kids during a time in their lives where they're unsure what's happening and what's going on has kept me going. And
Hmm.
a lot of times on the hard days, I think of all of the kids that I get to work with and where they're at now. And if I know that they are safe where they're at today in this moment, that is reassuring to me and just encourages me to keep going on and keep working on behalf of these kids and their parents.
Hmm. Wow. Well, I just want to say thank you for your care and your work and your sacrifice for our kids. 3 of my kids have joined our family through foster care and then eventually needed to be adopted. And I'm so grateful for the workers that were there for them and that walked with me. And so what you're doing, it really does matter and it makes a difference and it's so valuable.
Thank you.
I hope you know that. And I have loved talking with you. I have appreciated your heart and your spirit, and I think that we are all better for it. Delaney, is there anything else on your heart that you want to share with our listeners before we close?
I would just encourage people. I think a lot of what we've talked about has been talking about doing the hard thing, even when it is hard and even when it is uncomfortable. It does take a lot of sacrifice, but I am very grateful that God has led me into something hard and that He has met me in the hard. He has shown me more of who He is. He has given me grace and strength and mercy and sustenance to be who He's called me to be. And it gets messy and it's hard and it takes a lot, but I wouldn't trade it because I have seen God in new ways and greater ways and deeper ways than I would have been able to had I not chosen to get into something hard. So God calls us all into hard things, whether that be foster care or adoption or lots of other different things. And I would just encourage people to not be afraid of the hard, but to hold on tighter to God and to what He's calling you into, knowing that He will be enough for today and tomorrow and for forever, and He will bring beauty out of the hard things.
Wow. Thank you so much, Delaney, for being with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Well, I hope that today's episode encouraged you wherever you are on your foster care journey. We want you to stay connected, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you will never miss an episode. Also, we have great content at theforgotteninitiative.org. Thank you for watching. I cannot wait to be with you next time.